Hey, this is Steve Bloom, and you are listening to the GeekCast Radio Network.
You're listening to the GeekCast Radio Network. Partner Spotlight. Unleash the geek in you.
Thanks, Punisher. We really appreciate this.
We're nothing but white blood cells, hunting the infection called crime, a sickness that sneaks in through the cracks, the way that Brussels sprouts sneak onto a plate of delicious macaroni and cheese. Sure, the city looks safe. Just push the Brussels sprouts to one side, right? Rawr! No matter where you put them, their vile vegetable juices corrupt the whole plate. Oh, I'm out here to keep those stinking sprouts off the mac and cheese. Keep them from leaving the store in the first place.
Your man smelled like dirty laundry anyway!
Hogwarts mac and cheese.
Anyone else have any bright ideas?
So this episode of GeekCast Radio is being recorded live in the back alley of a Dollar General store. As Linda Flynn Fletcher would say on Phineas and Ferb, ew, it's grody back here. I am your host, Steve, Joe, and Mike. And we are continuing on with the Syndication Nation Spotlight. And this time around we have the Punisher Body Count guys, Dane and Jake. Hello, guys. How are you?
How's it going, Mike?
Hey, Mike.
It's going. All right, so we've talked with the G.I. Joe guys, we've talked with the Star Joes guys, who they're more so all about all the 80s properties, and now we talked to the two guys who started a podcast about one character and have managed to go over... Are you guys to 200 yet? Or over 200?
What?
No, are you talking about episodes? People?
Yeah. No, I'm not asking your age. No, we all know Jake is 1,000 years old anyway.
This is true. No, we're only at episode 65.
Yeah.
Oh,
I mean,
really?
technically it's a little bit more because we had like these joke episodes, like episode 0 to test, an episode 0.1 or 0.5 to make fun of like how Marvel renumbers things. But technically, yeah, not more than 60. We're still in the mid to late 60s, really. That's it.
Yeah. Well, see, one of my favorite eras of comic books is what I like to call the Chromium Age, which is the stuff that took place in the late 80s, early 90s. And one of the things we like to do on the show is make fun of the weird things that comic book companies do. So we put out an issue 0.5 because, I don't know, companies do that for some reason. And then when Marvel tried to do their 0.1 issues, we did a 0.1 episode, and then we re-released our test episode as an episode 0. So yeah, we like to do weird shit like that on our show. One of these days we're going to do a Chromium cover episode.
Oh, that'd be great.
Yeah, I don't know how we're going to do that, but it's coming.
There'll be a holographic Spawn trading card inside.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. All right, so what made you guys want to do a podcast in general? Not just, we'll get to why you picked Frank Castle later, but what made each of you want to become podcasters? Dane, you can go first.
That's interesting, because I was thinking about this a few days ago of how well I even knew or understood podcasts before Jake brought it up to me. It's kind of fuzzy to me. Like, I knew podcasts certainly existed. But I don't think I listened to many of them until Jake said we should start a podcast. And he explained it. It's like an internet radio show. and we can as soon as he said that, I said, oh, he's going to talk about X-Men, because him and his wife Emily have practically every X-Men up to a certain point, right?
We actually have every X-Men comic up to the reboot or whatever, whenever they renumbered. So
yeah.
we have a full run of I don't know, whatever X-Men you want to call the one that they did in the 90s. We've got all of that. We have all of the original Uncanny, so from 1963 up until 2011 or 2012.
Yeah, I mean,
Wow.
And so with that kind of collection, I thought, oh, it'd be about X-Men. But Jake said, no, there's already a podcast called Uncanny X-Cast. Let's not step on their toes. But basically, I was going back home because grad school was wrapping up for me, and my sister was getting married. Yeah.
What people might understand was me and Dane were living in Indianapolis at the time.
Oh, yes.
And then he's moving back to Pennsylvania around the time I pitched the podcast to him.
Yeah, and and we both realized, man, I'm really gonna miss you, dude. I'd go over to Jake's house, and he'd invite me to dinner. I went to Thanksgiving with Emily's family when I couldn't make it to my own family's Thanksgiving. I mean, that's
Emily's
how
my wife.
Yeah, and I realized, I'm really gonna miss you people. I mean, and you know how it is. You try and keep in touch, make phone calls, friend them on Facebook, but people get distant. And Jake realized, I gotta think up a project or something to keep us together. Or I think that was your thinking, right, Jake?
Well, yeah.
I don't want to put words in your mouth.
I think I should have led off on this question since the
Sure.
podcast was ultimately my idea.
It absolutely was, yeah.
Yeah. Actually, this is going to sound stupid and shallow, and I think people will take me less seriously after I say this, but I was listening to the Uncanny X-Cast and a few other podcasts, and I was amazed at how these people were really involved in the comic book world discussions. They got to talk to creators. People actually cared about their opinions on things. And I'm like, hey, I'm people too. Why don't people care about my opinion on comics? So I was like, I need to start a podcast. But here's the thing, a lot of our show is pretty much stolen from the Uncanny X-Cast. The general format is in a lot of the things that we do. And one of the things that Rob on the Uncanny X-Cast says is, you can't just do a general comic books podcast anymore, because everyone has one pretty much. So you really want to be in a niche somewhere. And I knew that I wanted to do a podcast with Dane, because he was moving away, and I thought that would be a good way for us to stay in touch, which was also stolen from the Uncanny X-Cast. That's the reason why they did it. And I knew Dane... you have to understand something about hanging out with Dane. He's very quick-witted. He has this uncanny ability to come up with an obscure reference that's obscure to where only nerds will get it. But if you are a nerd, you're going to get it immediately and laugh. He's got a good comedic misdirection. And I just knew that me and him had a good chemistry. We could talk for hours. And I knew he'd be the perfect person to podcast with. So now all we have to do is find a niche somewhere. And 90% of the conversations we had were about the Punisher. So it was just hey, let's do Punisher. And then everything kind of snowballed from there.
That's what she said.
Wow.
Right?
Actually, yes.
She said nothing of the sort.
No, as soon as Jake said that, all I can think of is, no, Sylvan didn't snowball him. I snowballed him from Clerks.
Yeah, no, I get it. That was very clever.
That was, that was top notch. Yeah.
All right. So, you're right. There are a million different general comic podcasts out there.
But the only general podcast I listen to is The Bull Bag.
Thank you.
Yeah, actually, that your show is surprisingly listenable when it really has we're just going to talk about what we feel like talking about. That's unless you're a talented comedian, that's podcast kryptonite to me, because I just go I'm sorry, dude. I didn't want to cut you off there.
No, there is a plan. It's the the pull bag is not grab bag at all. There is a complete plan.
Whereas
but
like
it also,
11 o'clock comics is a complete grab bag.
Well,
If you've ever listened to the show.
No.
Okay.
I I didn't. The pull bag has evolved as my comic tastes have evolved, or I should say, as certain comic companies have pissed me off with what they're doing with their storylines. And I've gravitated towards other things. Like the majority of the pull bag now, in the middle of the second year of the podcast, is a lot of franchise stuff. A lot of IDW books and stuff like that, because even DC, I used to be a huge DC fanboy.
Until they killed Nightwing, right?
Yeah, pretty much. Even though they brought him back as the new Nick Fury of the DC universe, it's not the same.
So are you saying the pull bag has become the IDW bag?
No. Because, no.
Sometimes we throw in some Dynamite, sometimes some Image. We mix it up.
Image is coming, actually, because Kyle Higgins, who wrote Nightwing, is doing his creator-owned series, Cowl, about what if superheroes had a labor union in 1960 Chicago.
You see, that's how you do it. You write superhero comics, you go do your own thing, and then you go back to that DC Marvel teat when you need to eat. It's a cruel cycle.
Well, he's still working at DC. He's doing the Batman Beyond thing, so
that's right.
But yeah, no, I mean I've heard of a lot of Batman podcasts. I've heard of a lot of Spider-Man podcasts. I've heard a lot of X-Men podcasts. But Punisher?
That's right.
To steal a line from The Miz, really?
Yeah, man.
I mean, it's not. I have nothing against the character. I absolutely, even though some of the episodes in the 90s were really, really bad, I loved his appearance in the Spider-Man cartoon. In my personal opinion, 2004 is the best movie. The other two can go fall off a cliff.
Okay.
So I was, when I forget how did you guys apply to the network? How did we come to have you? Okay.
Once again, if there's any new idea or bold direction, well, you can just assume it was spearheaded by Jake. I think the most innovative thing I've done on this show, beyond like what Jake says, like he can say witty things sometimes when he doesn't fuck up names, but like the biggest thing I've contributed to the show is like bits. Like I can use a voice changer and then make things funny a little. Like that's it. But yeah, so go ahead, Jake. Like what exactly, Jake? Here's one thing I want to know. Like what made you notice the GeekCast Radio Network? What made you want to sign up to it? Like because you just said I want to do this, and I said okay, sounds cool.
Well, Mike will be happy to hear this because it's his advertising is working. I listen to Star Joe's. I really like Chuck and Ryan. And now Robert Atkins. Robert Atkins is one of my favorite artists out there. Great guy. So yeah, I listened to Star Joe's, and I would hear the ads from GeekCast, and I was like, okay, they play ads on their shows, and I really want to expand what we're doing here. So let me see if I thought everyone just paid for advertisement on Star Joe. So I contacted, I was like, hey, can I buy ad space on your show? And they're like, oh yeah, absolutely. Here's our rates. The GeekCast guys, they get, it's a quid pro quo deal for being part of the network. I was like, let me see if I can join the network.
You see, that's the pragmatic Jake I know of.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I view podcasting as something anyone can do, but you do have to have, once you start, you have to grow your knack for doing it, your talent, and you have to learn. I mean, I've been podcasting for 6 years now, and I would not be where I am unless I've made all the mistakes that I've made in the past 6 years. But podcasting to me it's just friends talking about what they like. It's not like, even though 90% of my day is working for stuff on GeekCastRadio.com and getting podcast ready, because I'm a voice on, I'd say probably 65% of the shows we do. It's one of those things where because in my own personal life I have disabilities and limitations, so a real job is not an option. I can't go to Walmart, stand up 8 hours a day, because I actually tried that back in 2002 and I nearly fell down walking home. But anyway.
Wow, Mike, I didn't know this about you, dude. Like,
yeah. So I basically have every single hour of the day available to me to do pretty much whatever I want. And at the time in 2008, I'm like, I've been listening to podcasts for a while, and I'm like, I can do this. What do I? And one of the best things that one of the podcasters I was listening to, best of pieces of advice he gave me was just, if you're going to do a podcast, make sure it's something you really, really are passionate about, whether it's, if you're really excited about it or whether you want to tear it to shreds. Mm-hmm. And it was one of those things, okay, and at the time I had a live-in resident job. It's basically an apartment manager. I mean, I worked probably 4 hours a day. And I got a stipend every 2 weeks. It's one of those things where that started, and I've been going ever since. Now, I mean, I can get up in the morning, work 9 hours on, 10, 15 different podcasts, or I can work on one podcast that has, 5 or 6 episodes already recorded, get that edited, and be done with it. So for me, it's one of those things. Podcasting to me is everyday people. There are some that, do stuff like, I wouldn't say Kickstarter. They do stuff like Patreon and GoFundMe and stuff like that. And that's all well and fine. For me, podcasting...
That is not all well and fine, but we can get into that in a minute.
Well,
oh, yeah, I think... Well, okay, I have opinions about that, too. Yeah.
In 1 minute. Here's the thing. What I've learned is that in 6 years of me podcasting, 5 of those years the GCRN has been online. This is our 5th year. There are costs. And because I live on a strict, a fixed income, I budget my money well from month to month. But at the same time, it's like usually at the middle of the month, I'm bills have taken up 90% of it. So I've upgraded my equipment and everything else, and it's one of those things where at this point I've gotten a fan base enough for the network and for myself that if I need help, I can ask. And if people step up, that's fine. But I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, well, I did this 2.5 hour podcast, you should pay me 99 cents. I'm no way in hell I would ever say that, because to me,
now, we are on the same page with that.
I have bought some podcast episodes on iTunes.
Okay, like, for me...
Then you are a rube.
Wait.
Oh, I'm a rube. No, like... see, I have very different feelings about paying for types of content or paying a content creator. It
depends on what it is. Like, there's some people out there that... Okay, the only example I can think of is Kevin Smith. He does his podcast with ads that is free. And then he'll say, okay, well, if you want ad-free, you can pay for this. If you want ad-free. Honestly, to me, it doesn't matter where the ads are on a show. I don't know. I discovered listening to podcasts in 2006, 2007. I'm like, ooh, free stuff? That's good.
Yeah, first off, Jake and I think we can both agree we don't necessarily mind ads in podcasts. I mean,
don't
we
mind
even
ads at all.
No, because in fact, on many podcast apps on Android and iPhone, like for instance, I have an app called Downcast, and they actually have skip buttons that go forward 30 seconds or even forward 2 minutes, because some people just put them right in the center of the show. Sometimes they front load them. Every podcaster has a system for that. I never get, this is a strong word, but I never get offended by a podcaster trying to make money. But I guess the only time I do take offense is when it's something, it's something they have fake enthusiasm about. Because the thing is, once you have a fake enthusiasm on your podcast, that kills its soul, and it will eventually creep in to how other people feel about the podcast itself.
True. Jake, thoughts?
Yeah, I just really don't like podcasters who are begging their listeners for money, essentially. I I don't want to call any podcasts out by name,
Right.
but they'll say, oh, this show's only made possible because of member contributions, and you should join our membership plan, and oh, we're going to give you 15 bonus minutes of material and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, get out and get a fucking job, dude. Like, okay, this is going to have a lot of parallels to the art community, okay? And maybe I have my own head up my ass and people are free to disagree. Address your email to Jacob at punisherbodycount@gmail.com. But I'm not going to pay you to podcast, okay? Podcast is something you do because you love it and you want to have your voice heard by the community and you want to hang out with friends and talk and shoot the breeze or do whatever. That's what podcasting is for. Podcasting isn't for you to get a backdoor into being a radio DJ, in my opinion, which is what a lot of people seem to want to do. And there's one podcaster in particular that I listen to a lot that, I don't know, he does all of his, he gets his full income from selling his shows or through memberships. And I think that that's shitty, in my opinion.
See, you hit the nail on the head, Jake. For me personally, I'm going to podcast whether people listen or not. I do it for myself. I do it because
you do it for the art.
No, I don't do it for the art. It depends on what decade the art's in when it comes to comics anyway. It's one of those things where really it's more so, like I said before, I wanted to get, I wanted to see if I could take a crack at this, and I've always wanted to be in radio. I mean, ever since I was a kid, I loved listening to morning radio DJs and everything else. I'm like, oh, that would be a cool job. And yes, I know they don't get paid crap, but it's just one of those things where this allows me to do whatever the fuck I want to. Thankfully, the FCC has no control over podcasting, because that was one of the things I told Steve Megatron when we started GCRN. I said, look, dude, I usually have to censor myself in real life because I'm around a whole bunch of people that don't really get me saying a whole bunch of curse words. And it's one of those things where I am podcasting for people like us, people our age, people who, have the same interests as us. I'm not podcasting for children. So all of the network podcasts at this point, after 5 years, have always been tagged explicit. I do know that at some point Steve wanted to start a parenting podcast. That's fine. That's that obviously that doesn't need an explicit tag, but it's one of those things where I love to fucking curse sometimes, and there are just so many fucking things that just piss me off that I'm like, oh, okay, I can do all this and say all this now. And like I said, I love the whole process. I love the recording, the editing, even though I get backlogged sometimes. I still love sitting down in front of my editing software and, ooh, what kind of cool clip can I throw in here, or where should I place this at? Usually, most of the podcasts I edit, the ads are at the end of the show. There might be something, like when we did our 5-year anniversary contest thing, I put that ad at the beginning of the show to let people know that there was a contest going on. But yeah, I mean, I podcast for me, honestly.
Okay, well, let me just say this about, because I really do disagree with Jake, and I disagree with the notion that with like people that podcast or create comics or make music or create content in general on the internet, like they're doing something bad when setting up a Patreon account or something. Because here's two main trends that have happened really in less than 10 years. One, the internet and technology itself has made the creation of content and the retrieval of said content really easy and available. That's wonderful. Another thing that's been happening is that people have shown, like on a financial trend, on economically, they're more willing to. There'll always be a group that will spend $60 for a video game, and maybe someone out there will pay like $30 for a Criterion Blu-ray. But most people these days are more willing, for entertainment purposes, to throw like 99 cents at an app or a couple bucks to subscribe to something they like $8 for Netflix. They're more willing to donate money for a digital smile, essentially, something that entertains them. What I like about Patreon is that if you're a nobody and you set up a Patreon account, you're going to stay a nobody. If you create a Kickstarter to make a really cool RPG with RPG Maker using sprites you didn't make, well, then you're a talentless 14-year-old and no one's going to donate except maybe your mom. But what these systems are in place for are for passionate people that would like to create more content, but they had to do a double shift at Kmart, and so they couldn't create that extra piece of content for people. Allowing fans that have been the most successful people on Patreon or donations or Kickstarter, whatever, or Indiegogo, whatever system they use, they are successful because they have been podcasting for years because they love it. And now they'd like their fans to see, like, if you'd like me to create more, let's work together on this. That's the system I see in place. And I can tell you, like, I've contributed to certain people on these things simply because, like, I want to see more work from them. And it's not a sin to do that, to ask for that.
Jake, thoughts?
It doesn't make them less passionate. That's my only thing. We're laying back going, oh, get a job. They do have jobs. They'd still like to get some income.
True.
I don't know. Like, you make some good points, but I guess at the end of the day, I'm just not buying it.
It's okay. Here's the thing. It's okay to not, like, be behind it. It's okay not to follow what they're doing. That's fine. It's just the idea of someone, like, they're rubing you somehow by asking you, because there's plenty of
guess
podcasts
that's what I'm
like
say. There's one particular podcast that I listen to where if you get the quote unquote premium content, you're just getting like 15 extra minutes of bullshit, right? They were going to record that extra 15 minutes no matter what. They didn't have to do a double shift at Kmart to create that content, right? So that's bullshit that they're asking money for that, in my opinion. Whereas there's a certain other, podcast that me and you listen to, Dane, and if they could produce more content by getting the money, maybe I can see it. I'm personally not going to donate, but
certainly,
if you're truly getting more out of it, then maybe it's worth it. I don't know, but most podcasts, generally speaking, they were going to do it whether you donated money or not. So,
oh yes, absolutely.
Yeah, and those people are the jerk offs, in my opinion.
Gee, thanks, Jake, because I guess I fall into that category. It's one of those things for me. I would podcast anyway, and I've said this many times in the past 6 years that I've podcasted. I'm glad I don't get a paycheck, like an actual job for doing this, because I enjoy what I do. Now, if people want to send me stuff for review or whatever, if people want to contribute money, it's going to go back into the website. And all podcasts do this. Most of them.
Well, hold on. I think we were talking about two different things. I mean, I don't hear you on the pullback going, oh, this is a great show. It's only possible by GeekCast contributions, and go ahead and send me money and you can get this extra 5 minutes of bonus. I don't hear you do that, so you're not the jerk off.
Yeah, there's a podcaster out there that's like 5 minutes of me telling you my feelings about Batman out there. There's a guy somewhere and he's got a pet unicorn. Like, oh my God. The thing is, most podcasters these days, they have those donations. So here's the thing, like, if you buy an app, like a free app, it's like, let's say the free to play games that I've played, they're often really broken games. It's like, here's a free dog. By the way, 3 of its legs are missing, but it's still a dog. Don't bitch. But if you give us $20, we'll give you 2 legs for 2 days. Have fun. $50, you get the gold dog. But we don't get that with podcasts. Podcasts and a lot of people, like I said, working in webcomics, they're sending out a standard amount. Like, you're not one thing I love about the way technology is set up now, we're still getting the steady supply. We're not getting a gypped deal like the free-to-play apps. We're getting, for the most part, like a regular amount of content. But if you'd like more, if you'd like some bonus content, have at it. That's my favorite kind of DLC. Like, if I've started getting back into video games, I see how sneaky they can get with certain shit.
Yes, they can.
Yeah, but sometimes they
Video
go like
games eat you alive.
Absolutely, but sometimes it's like, hey, we've unleashed an entire continent for you to explore for $5, and I see, wow, that took some people some time to make. I'll send you $5 to explore that land. That's fine, but I don't want to like, hey, we'll give you a flame effect on your sword for $2. Ah, fuck you. That is something someone made in an afternoon. Like, that's not okay. But I don't see the flame effect in people asking, for the most part. I'm sure there's some people shilling, like Jake said. Like, the problem that Jake and I always get into is that we build up these straw men in our heads, and then then it's like, well, you disprove mine first, asshole. And then we make a dick joke, and then we continue on with the show.
All right. Yeah. 37 in a row?
Oh, it's much more than that on our show.
Oh, God. Yeah, I know. What has been the best and worst thing about having a Punisher podcast? Jake?
Well, I think the best thing has been the creator interviews. Getting a chance to talk with Greg Rucka, Tom Jane, Mike Barron. That's been, I don't know, that's been more than I ever thought was possible. Even though we did a Punish this side tangent here, you had kind of asked, like, why did we choose the Punisher? I mean, it was something that me and Dane really liked and we had a mutual interest in, but also it was going to sustain a podcast, right? It was, the Punisher's a flagship character, or he's an A-list character, so he's going to have at least one series at any one time. So the new issues were going to be there. He had tons of back issues to discuss. He's going to pop up in pop culture, right? So,
yeah, he's going to be on the bumper sticker of someone's pickup truck or a Marines tattoo. He'll or some troubled 14-year-old teenager's T-shirt, of which I own 3. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, getting to interact with this character, and it's also a bonus that no one else had a podcast about it. So we kind of got into a monopoly situation there. Yep. But what's the worst thing about it? Thunderbolts. Having to...
I kind of figured you were going to say that.
Well, it may be, you can, more broadly speaking, having to buy and read stories that are just utter garbage that I normally would not have got if it were not for the fact that I had a Punisher podcast.
Mm-hmm.
It is amazing how Jake and I have to try and squeeze blood out of stones, not only when they're bad stories, but when they are set up for like Jake and I have mentioned this before, and I'm sure you've noticed this, Mike, just the 6-issue made for the trade format. And so you're like, oh, this is just the issue. Everyone's just going to sit down and talk, and then maybe something will happen at the end. And that's fine. That's fine. Decompression for me is a tool. It's like any other tool. It can be fine on its own. But when something's 6 issues, and sometimes writers just don't have 6 issues of story, and that's been practically every issue of Thunderbolts. They just can't make this concept fun. Maybe it could have been fun in 3. Maybe not, because there have been times where it's just, this is just bad. And then we have to talk about it. And it's funny because, like, there is a culture for online critics. Like, there is a true culture of just creating hysterics and making comedy over, look how bad this movie is. Let's make fun of Birdemic for an hour, and people will do that. And that gets fun, but then it eventually makes like things a little bit toxic. Because Jake and I quite enjoy talking about good things. Like that replenishes your soul after a bit.
It surprises me how much the geek culture will turn on you if you're overly negative. Like Dane said, people will be like, that's kind of funny. But then after too long, they'll be like, do you guys just like anything? You guys are just jaded. Why don't you stop doing this? And, I feel Dane and I always try to have honest discussions. If we hate something, we hate it. And if we like it, we like it. And we try to always give it straight.
And we try and at least explain things. Because one thing is that when you're podcasting, I don't think, I mean, you certainly have the right. You have the right to say whatever you want, but I think you have something of a responsibility to go further than like what your friend would say about a movie. Like, hey, you see that Captain America 2? Yeah, you like? Oh, it sucked balls. Why? It just did. Like, it just did. Sue me. Like, if you're on a podcast, you have to explain what exactly made the ball sucking occur. Like, what happened? And that's what I feel that Jake and I try and do. Even when we say, like, this is really bad, if you like it, that's fine. But I'm going to spend the next 15 minutes talking about why it's bad, and maybe you should feel a little bad. And that's a lot better than just making fun of something, and much worse, which we really don't do, is making fun of someone for enjoying something. That's something that always makes me turn on a reviewer. Like, look at the dipshits that like this thing. And I go, you know what? We all have our things. Some of us have, like, everyone has their football. Everyone has their dumb obsession that in an objective sense means nothing. And it should be made fun of. I don't know.
I know
I'm sure there's exceptions.
Well, we make fun of Deadpool fans, but that's about it.
Yeah, they're our mortal enemies in a way, even though I have a lot of Deadpool merchandise and such. I actually keep my Deadpool shirt in a separate drawer from the Punisher shirt, and I keep it tucked away under many ties, and I go, no one must know. No one must know.
He's a closeted Deadpool fan, ladies and gentlemen. Here's the thing. I have never read Deadpool. It's not that I don't have an interest in it, but I'm not a Marvel guy. I know the general Marvel stuff. I know X-Men. I know some Spider-Man. I know some Iron Man. I know, Cap and Wolverine and all this and all that and everything else. And I know a little bit about Punisher after the first annual Punisher month on the pullback last year. It's one of those things where I don't know, Deadpool, I just don't get it. And then I saw that teaser thing that they did for the supposed new film or the new TV series or whatever it's supposed to be, and I just laughed my ass off.
I
probably the only Ryan Reynolds thing that I actually enjoyed.
Well, generally speaking, I think Deadpool is for like 13-year-old boys, because first of all, what does a 13-year-old boy enjoy doing? He enjoys hacking video games and makes it to where he can run around, kill everybody. No one can do anything to him. And then he just makes wisecracks about how you suck and he's awesome, right?
Jay, that was actually my favorite thing to do with video games when I was 13. I'm not shitting you. Like, I would be like, well, nearly got my head bashed in a locker and I had to punch someone in the ribs to survive today. Man, middle school's fun. I'm going to kill 1,000 things in my video games today. Just, where's the God mode code? Oh my God. Jake is absolutely right.
And now what does Deadpool do?
He is like the God mode guy that says witty lines. And here's the thing. Deadpool is a fun character, and he actually does have a certain depth to him, which is kind of sad because Marvel does put their hat on. Wow, isn't he so lol random? Don't you like him? But there are plenty of great runs, like the Nichia run. I'm sure I'm saying his Nichia run. There's the legendary Joe Kelly run. Gail Simone did a excellent run of the character and gave him like a nice group of cast members that still survive to this day. But like Jake said, just like when there's any group you can point at and laugh about certain things about them. Like when we point fun at Deadpool fans, like we don't go like, ha, what a subtle yet powerful run by Joe Kelly. It's, oh man, chimichangas. Am I right, motherfuckers? Like, wow. That just sticks them right in the ribs. Just shiv like a prison shiv.
Yeah, over the years I've gone short podcasts, long podcasts, back and forth. Some people like long podcasts, some people like short podcasts.
Hey, dude,
what I find now with the pullback, Jake, you guys mentioned the 6-issue trade and all that stuff. What I find now is with the pullback doing mostly trade, coverage in trade form now, they tend to be anywhere from an hour and 50 minutes to, I think the longest one we've got to this point is 3 hours and 30 minutes.
That's a pretty long podcast.
Yeah, that's Joe Rogan level right there.
Is there a question here, or is this a subtle way to make fun of how long our show is?
No. What I'm saying is I find that because of the way I do the pullback now with trades versus single issues, the coverage and discussion tends to last longer. Like, the episode we have coming up, or, the episode we had that released a little while ago was, like I said, 3 hours, 30 minutes. 1 hour and 44 of that is one trade. The other hour and 44 of that is it's basically two trades in one show. But it's just one of those things where sometimes it can go. It just depends on the book. The Transformers so far, the Transformers coverage on the pullback and the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles coverage on the pullback is the longest coverage at this point. I think I've got over in total amongst 8 episodes in the 2 years, I've gotten over 13 hours of Transformers coverage on the pullback.
Yeah.
Well, here's the thing about Punisher body count, because for those who may not listen to the show, our shows tend to be anywhere from an hour 45 to about 2.5 hours long. Mm-hmm. And we have a format to the show. We do like a quick little greeting to kind of get our chemistry set up for the show and tell some funny stories to loosen up the audience. Then we do news. We talk about, upcoming Punisher news, geekdom news in general. Then we answer fan mail. And then we talk about the new Punisher comics. We talk about the old Punisher comics. And then we kind of sneak in our general pop culture segment at the end, which is our compromise of focusing just on the Punisher, but yet doing a little bit extra at the end. And so we're going to discuss everything we have until we go through our segments, and we make notes about the books that we read, and we want to get through all of our talking points before we move on. And Dane can also be a little long-winded, so when it's all said and done, we're just always at the 2 hour and some mark.
And I think, yeah, I like podcasts to come out regularly. Like I listen to like the 7 a.m. newscast on NPR. Of course, that comes out every day. And there's also certain podcasts that give out like 10-minute bursts, like Grammar Girl or financial help, and they always give off some quick tips. And I like those. Those are fun bursts for my 15-minute commute to work or whatever. But when you're dealing with the episodic format of comics, we are lucky that we have a character like the Punisher, where at least they'll throw us a bone and have a mini-series or a side series that Punisher shows up in, or maybe we'll just load on some more comics to the flashbacks page. But really, we have rarely done a show that did not feature a new Punisher comic, unless there's like an interview or movies that we're reviewing. And so that restricts often how often the show can come out. So we put up like the quantity of time rather than the quantity of episodes. I think it's a fair trade.
Oh yeah, I mean, as far as when podcasts should release, I'm of the mind that once you set a schedule for the listeners, not necessarily yourselves, but for the listeners, like in the first episode of a podcast, if you tell the listeners, okay, this show is going to come out every week at this time, or every week on this day at some point during this day, or it's going to come out every 2 weeks, or it's going to come out once a month, or it's going to come out 2 days a week, or whatever else. You need to stick to that as best you can. Yes, sometimes life does happen, and things get, in the way, and that's all well and good. But it's one of those things where, to me, personally, you have to live up to what you set for. Like, if I sit here and say, okay, the pullback is going to come out once a week, and then I record an episode in August, and I don't record I don't release another episode until December, then there's something wrong.
Yeah.
As long as life does, like, say for example, someone dies in my family. Heaven forbid that ever happens. But it has happened in the past. Stuff like that. It's the best example I can think of. Sure, actually, for me, probably dealing with grief like that would probably be to not necessarily just bottle it up, but kind of put it to the side of my mind and just go ahead and plow through.
You know what?
As many podcasts as I can to kind of get my mind off of it. But
Mike,
I don't know.
I just want to let you know I definitely understand that. Like,
yeah,
there was a family tragedy with my family. There was a tragedy in my family a few years ago. And the first time I really felt like free and that I could be Dane, and not like, oh, look at this poor guy, because that's the pity people give you, and that's fine. They mean well, but just being able to do the show and like do jokes and feel happy again, like it really is true. People say like throwing yourself back in your work. You don't want to go overboard, but it can save you in a way.
Absolutely.
I have always been super thankful for the podcasts, for that, and the people listening. Yeah.
Absolutely. All right. What has been...
Hey,
go ahead.
Like, don't want to be egotistical here, but I actually did have answers for the best and worst parts of the podcast.
Sorry.
For myself. No, it's okay.
Sometimes I forget.
No, it's okay. Like, especially
like that.
With this conversational atmosphere, like we switch off, and that's fine. But
yeah.
there were just two quick things I wanted to bring up. Like, the best thing for me doing this podcast has been the fan base. Like, I remember Jake and I would often get into conversations when we first started. Like, when you're two guys starting a project, you always think big, and you'll always go, look, and then we sell the t-shirts, and then we can take it on tour or something. When we didn't have any listeners. But then when the podcast grew, I knew, okay, I am talking about The Punisher, which is a violent anti-hero vigilante, and I'm also talking about comics. People will eventually really hate us, or there'll be a segment that just fucking hate you for your opinions. Like, forget Republicans versus Democrats. Like, let's talk to someone who, like, forget that, small potatoes. Talk to someone that likes the Dan Slott run and also thinks that the Dan Slott run of Spider-Man is Satan incarnate. That you'll see two people willing to rip each other's faces off. That's the mentality I walked into with the Punisher, and we've made mistakes. And like Jake said, we've talked about comics we don't like or that people love. But the thing that has taken me off guard, like I really was waiting for the other shoe to drop for someone to hate me, and because I've seen it with other people. I've seen it with bloggers and everything. It never happened with us. Not really.
It hasn't happened yet, we should say.
Yeah. Well, obviously it hasn't happened yet. Like, I can't tell in the future. But every time we say something wrong or we bash something that we just really didn't like, the politeness that comes from Punisher fans and the enthusiasm, and they're willing to contribute to the show. Like, you know what? I'll get mushy. It's downright heartwarming. Like, just because it makes me want to do the show more. If people just constantly said Dane and Jake suck ass, these guys are awful, I'd like to think I have the kind of skin to plow through and go, hey, screw you guys, we're doing it anyway, it's fun. I don't know. I really don't know where I'd be on episode 65, or if there would be one. But it's the enthusiasm of the people and how great and active and how gosh darn nice people are about a psychotic vigilante that we all know and love. It's wonderful. And even the creators that we've interviewed have talked about how great and supportive the fan base is. And we only wish it was a little bit bigger, so like most series don't tap out around issue 28 or whatever. And let's see here. The worst thing, honestly, is, and I've brought this up, the looking back on previous episodes, and I'm sure you know what I mean by that, Mike. Like, the work you've done 2 years ago just makes your teeth clench. Oh man, why'd I do that? Why didn't I understand the noise removal control on Audacity back then? God damn it!
Someone recently left an iTunes review on Tooncast Classic, which has been retired for 2 or 3 years now.
Yeah.
They said, basically all they said was, the show would be alright if they would check the mic levels. Well, we were learning back then.
Yeah, but hey, it's on the internet. It's there. Unless you want to try and switch out the files and change history. And I'm sure some people have done that. Jake and I haven't. But Jake doesn't mind. Like, you're okay with, like, you go, hey, it's the past, right?
Well, I get what you're saying with the technical issues. It does kind of make me grit my teeth a little bit. But when I've gone back and listened to the past episodes, I think the key is the content is good. Like, one of my favorite old episodes is when we discussed Die Hard and the Big Easy. Which that was this crazy-ass Punisher story where Punisher goes down to New Orleans and fights a voodoo witch doctor.
Jake, you broke up there for a minute. You're breaking up, Jake.
No, I hear him now. I hear both of you. But yeah, he was fighting the voodoo witch doctor.
Yeah, he was fighting the voodoo witch doctor. The voodoo witch doctor cut open the chicken, poured the blood all over Frank, and then buried him in a coffin with the chicken. And that was just a fun story, and we had a ball discussing it. And the mic levels were pretty bad. We were just using shitty USB mics. And even though the sound quality isn't the greatest, like, the discussion is really good. And after a while, you can tune out the bad audio.
Yeah, you can get used to it. And I remember we laughed so hard with that voodoo man. Well, like, the mics popped. Like, we hit a limit because we were screeching so loud. Like, to me, that shows that we were having a great time. And so I consider whenever the mics pop or whatever, that's a badge of honor for those old shows. Because we were really, when Jake and I entertain each other that much, it's a good show.
Dane cringes when new listeners are like, oh, I'm going back and listening to the old episodes. No one has really complained.
What do you recommend, guys? Ignore all of them. Ignore all of them up to, like, episode 20. Just fucking stop. It's like, but you actually interviewed Mike Baird. Fuck that. That was our first interview. It was awful. Don't do it. And everyone gets really like, oh, I'm sorry. Like, I actually had to stop doing that because it made people feel like assholes for liking the earlier ones. And I never intended that. Like, they say, well, I liked your earlier stuff. Well, that kind of, what does that say about you if I hate it? Like, so I stopped that because like, people are not as harsh of critics as you are on yourself often.
Dane, it's kind of the equivalent of telling people not to watch Citizen Kane just because it's in black and white.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, and the worst thing, honestly, about the show, like, this is just obviously I said previous episodes, but this is actually something. The previous episodes, I'm kind of glad. Like you said, they're a learning experience, and Jake and I have worked very hard to improve our audio levels and just the regular production of the show. But one thing, like, I just noticed is the change of language a little bit. Like, one thing that listening to shows made me realize, like, when I was first starting out, I said, wow, I'm a grown-ass man, and I'm calling things I don't like as gay. And I know, like, other people say, like, well, that has a different connotation or whatever. But I realized, like, I can probably, I'm an English teacher. I can probably step it up a little bit with with how I describe things. And let's make no bones about it. Jake and I have a podcast where, like, we swear like sailors. Like, both my father's friends have found the show and think it's hilarious that I have this side to myself. And we talk about sexual stuff, but, like, a lot of people talk about the First Amendment and freedom of speech and stuff like that. But I never wanted to create, like, a show that would make people feel, you know, bad or feel outcasts. And so, like, Jake and I had to say, like, one thing I'm really glad is that we kind of stopped, like, using stuff like that. Like, I think at one point one of us made, like, a tranny joke, and then we both decided, like, let's not do that. Like, let's not screw with these people or something. And that's the thing. Like, I kind of cringe listening back to earlier episodes, but I'm glad because I still have a fear someone's gonna find it. Someone's gonna find that fucking joke that we made or some remark, and that's going to end us or whatever. But we've improved over time. We're still horribly immature people.
When it comes to the equipment and the upgrading, what I've found in 5 years of the GCRN being online is don't ever, unless you find it in a radio station dumpster, do not ever use a headset USB mic.
That's what we started out with. Oh my god!
Yeah. Thanks for telling us. Actually, no. What's even worse?
Here's a time machine, Mike.
Well, it's one of those things where I found out the hard way because you have to adjust the headphone and then you have to adjust the microphone, and even if even if you touch even just your index finger and your thumb to not the microphone itself, but the actual piece of plastic, it'll pick it up unless it's a condenser. Like, I can sit here and put my hand around my mic and it's fine because it's a condenser mic, and unless I sit here and go flick Jake in the head, no one's going to hear it.
Yeah.
The funny thing with a condenser mic that I notice is when I'm recording, if people are... I live in a complex now where there's a lot of children around and parents aren't so watchful, and they'll run around screaming at the top of their lungs. We'll hear it during the record, yet when I go back to edit, I don't hear any of it. It's amazing.
All the clicking Jake and I used to do, like, let's move on to the next part of the show. Click, click. It'd be like, here, wait, right into the mic here.
Yeah. Actually, what's sad is, the Uncanny Xcast, they don't use condenser mics to the best of my knowledge. They said they just use the shitty USB game mics. Mm-hmm. So that's what I had us start off with. But Dane's cheap ass, he's like, no, I got this one that just plugs in with a regular stereo jack. I'll be fine. I use the same kind of mic you saw Bob Barker use on The Price is Right.
But
it was even more plastic and shitty. Like,
I know exactly how I'm going to end this episode now.
Let's play Plinko. Let's go. Oh, God. It was just a stupid auxiliary cord. Oh, my God. It was bad.
It's not because I don't want to. It's not because I don't know how to use the technology. My setup works fine for me now, especially now that I have these giant can noise-canceling headphones from JVC. Everyone I know says, oh, you got to get a mixer. You got to get a mixer. Well, number one, I don't have room on my desk for a mixer, even though my desk is 6 foot by 9 foot. I just don't have the room, and I don't have the patience to learn it. I've had this microphone since late 2009, and it hasn't failed me yet. If this microphone ever does die, I'll go back and buy the same damn thing, because if this thing has lasted me, from 2009 to now, obviously if I buy another one of the same thing, it's going to last me from whenever to whenever.
Wait, so your mic just jacks straight into your computer?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah,
it's USB, but it's
I get that.
Yeah,
because Dane and I, we have a small mix. We have the exact same setup equipment, and we have a small mixer. It doesn't have much, but I'm actually wanting to expand into a mixer because we have this fantasy where we actually do like a morning zoo type episode, and we want to have as a joke, and we want to get a soundboard and all this kind of thing. Plus, it would make doing our little bits a lot easier. Which, man, if you could, is there any way Dane can send you one of our funny bits and you can tack it onto the show?
Absolutely.
Because some of these bits are hilarious. Dane really knows how to meta some of these situations. Like, I think one of my favorite ones is when we think that Frank is going to die in Thunderbolts, and Dane's just metagaming it, going, "No, I'm going to a brand new series, guys. It's going to be okay."
Yeah, and then go to a better place. You mean heaven? Fuck no. Out of this series and into my own. It's going to be great.
Yeah. And then he turns it into like a giant Seinfeld thing at the very end.
Lord.
Having a soundboard would make doing things like that so much easier.
Yep.
See, with the call recording software that I bought the license for X number of years ago, it used to have a rich mood it used to have a built-in soundboard, but the stupid thing, it only allows you to use WAV files. Now, I have nothing against WAV files, but MP3 is much better.
Yeah, MP3 all the way. You go mono, you go MP3, you condense that to 96K, motherfucker. That's the way to do it.
Exactly. All right.
We ain't making a Skrillex album here. We just talk about comics.
Okay, so we're going to go to a quick clip from Punish a Body Count, and we're also going to include a quick clip from the show that we haven't talked about this entire hour, which is the fact that Jake's wife actually made Jake and Dane get classy. We'll be back after this.
Hey, GeekCast listeners. Do you ever listen to Punish a Body Count and think to yourself, This show would be awesome if it had less toilet humor and was not about the Punisher. If so, join me, Emily Williams, as I class up the Punisher guys on Dane and Jake Get Classy. We're like the Oprah Book Club of comics. You'll hear us discuss famous works like The Dark Knight Returns and The Crow, along with graphic novels no one else is talking about, like Blue Monday and Blankets. You can find us at daneandjakegetclassy.wordpress.com or on iTunes.
Guys, I don't think I'm gonna make it through this one.
What tipped you off, genius? The internal bleeding or the fact that you can see your own intestines?
You're right, leader. But before I go, there's something I need to tell you.
And what would that be?
Come a little closer.
All right, but I don't see why I should...
Jesus Christ, Frank, you killed him again? I can't believe you did that!
I can't believe he did that with 2 broken arms. Radical!
Isn't there any way we can save Frank, guys?
No, don't. It's okay. Just let me go. I'm going to a better place.
You mean heaven?
No, even better. My own series. We're 3 issues in, and it's by a pretty solid creative team. I'm sorry, Elektra. You probably don't know what I'm talking about right now.
Go fuck yourself, Frank.
Hey, man, you want to see this sweet-ass feather before you go? Frank, my magic angel feather fixed you. It's a miracle. Now you can go on even more adventures with us.
Yay.
God damn it! Chimichangas!
Alright, so there you go, folks. There's a sample of Dane's witty editing skills, and of course, Dane and Jake Get Classy. Go check that show out. Go check out Punisher Body Count. Where can they get this content, guys?
Well, our main show can be found at punisherbodycount.com. That's all one word. You don't need the www. You can find it there. You can also find us on iTunes. If you just go to the Google machines and type Punisher Podcast for the top result. We're also on Stitcher. And then our side podcast that we didn't get a chance to talk about, Dane and Jake Get Classy, where we look at either classical graphic novel works, up-and-coming independent works, or just, I don't know, something that just no one else is talking about.
Or Dark Knight Returns.
Or Dark Knight Returns.
That
falls under the classic. That falls under the classic.
Yeah, like we always go like, oh, we go into the more classic independent stuff, and then we go, and Batman and Dark Knight Rises. No, we didn't do that one. That was a movie.
Yeah.
Yes.
But that one can be found at Dane and Jake Get Classy, one word, .wordpress.com, or on iTunes.
Yeah,
that one's not on that one's not on Stitcher or GeekCast.
No,
yeah.
we're not.
Yeah.
It's still a babby podcast. Still a little babby.
Yes. Yeah, you can also head on over to geekcastradio.com to check out Punisher Body Count under the Syndication Nation banner. Coming up next, I believe we are going to jump into the Hooniverse with Mark 42's Hooniverse. After that, I'm not sure. I think it's Geek Scholars, movie news, and other stuff. You can check out Punisher Body Count on Facebook. You can also get us on Facebook, GeekCast Radio Network. I think that's going to do it.
Yep.
You guys have anything else before we leave?
No. Friend us on MySpace. You might get our top 8. I mean, we stay in touch. Like, fuck Instagram. MySpace is coming back.
Yeah, Instagram is just Twitter for people who can't read. But,
oh my God! What?
Unleash the geek in you, and we will catch you next time.
For the regular?
Sure.
Got it.
Hey, Kevin. How you doing, man? How are you, buddy? Good. Here it is, man. Going in from Miami. Check out the merchandise.
Hey, man, no. I trust you.
All right.
Look, I don't know what you're into, but...
Amazing Spider-Man number 129, mint condition. Worth $1,000.
Comic book.
No, it's not just a comic book. This is the first appearance of the Punisher. This is the holy grail of comic books.
You collect comic books. That's so cute.
Cute. It's very rugged and manly.
just a bit geeky.
You've just listened to GeekCast Radio on the GeekCast Radio Network. There are several ways to get in contact with us or leave feedback for the show. First, visit the website, geekcastradio.com, where you can comment on all of our different podcasts. Second, you can rate our show and leave us feedback in iTunes. Third, follow us on Twitter at GeekCast Radio. Fourth, become a fan on Facebook. Go to facebook.com/GeekCastRadio. Call the voicemail line 502-526-5821. Please remember to tell us the show you are leaving the message for and your name. So until next time, unleash the geek in you.